It is as important to know or to understand what cooperation is, when to cooperate and when not to cooperate. Is that all right? I'm sorry. It is important to cooperate, and also it is important to find out when not to cooperate. You heard recently this report, read in English, and indicates that there is no cooperation. But to understand this state of mind that will not cooperate, one also must learn what it means to cooperate. Both are important. Surely, most of us cooperate when there is self-interest. When we see profit or pleasure or gain in cooperating, which is self-interest, based on self-interest, then we generally do cooperate, put our hearts and our minds into it, give ourselves over to a commitment to something that we believe in, and with that we cooperate, with that authority, with that ideal, with that necessity. But also it seems to me it's very important to learn when not to cooperate. Because most of us are unwilling when we are in a mood to cooperate, to find out what it is not to cooperate. The two go together, really. And it's very important, it seems to me, to understand this thing. If we cooperate around an idea, around a person, take a stand about something around which we will cooperate, then it ceases to be cooperation. Because when that idea, when that authority, when that interest ceases, then we break away from it and try to cooperate with another, or with another idea, or with another authority. But all that cooperation, surely, is based on self-interest. And when that self-interest no longer brings any profit, gain, or pleasure, then we do not cooperate. But to understand when not to cooperate is as important as when to cooperate. And this cooperation really must come out of a totally different dimension. And that's what we are going to talk about presently. We said when we last met here, what is the essential question? The essential issue in our human life. I do not know if you have gone into it, if you have thought about it. But what do you think is really the central issue in human life to be lived in this world with all the turmoil, chaos, misery, confusion, people trying to dominate each other and so on and on and on? I wonder what you think about it. What to you is the central issue or the only challenge in life that must be responded when you see what is actually taking place throughout the world? The conflict of various kinds, from the student to the war, the political conflict, the division between man and man, the ideological differences for which we are willing to kill each other, the religious differences which begets intolerance, various forms of brutality and so on. Seeing all that in front of us, actually not theoretically, what is the central issue? The speaker will point out what the central issue is. Please don't agree or disagree. Examine it. Look at it, whether it is true or false. To find out what is true, one must not only look at it objectively, critically, but also one must look at it intimately. Look at it with that personal interest that you give when some crisis in your life happens, when your whole being is challenged. The central issue is complete, absolute freedom of man. First, psychologically, inwardly, then outwardly. There is no division between the outer and the inner. But for clarity's sake, one must first understand this inward freedom, whether it is at all possible, living in this world, not retiring to some monastery, which is quite neurotic, or secluding oneself in an isolated tower of one's own imagination. Living in this world, that's the only challenge one has. Freedom. Because if there is no freedom inwardly, then the chaos begins. Then there are innumerable psychological conflicts, oppositions, indecisions, lack of clarity, lack of deep insight. And which expresses itself, obviously, outwardly, belonging to no political party, either communism or capitalism, belonging to no religion, accepting no authority outwardly, in the sense one has to follow the laws of the country and all the rest of it, following, keeping to the right or the left when you're driving. But the decision to obey, to comply, comes from inward freedom. The acceptance of the outer demands, outer law, is the acceptance of an inward freedom. I think that is the central issue. And there is no other issue. Because we human beings are not free. We are heavily conditioned. By the culture we live in, by the social environment, by religions, by vested interests of the army or the politicians, or the ideological commitment to which we have given ourselves over. So we are, as human beings, conditioned. And being conditioned, we are aggressive. This aggression, the sociologists, the anthropologists, and the economists are explaining. They have two theories. Either you have inherited it from the animal, this sense of aggressive spirit, or the society which each human being has built impels you, compels you, forces you to be aggressive. The fact is more important than the theory, whether it is derived from the animal or the society makes you. That is irrelevant. We are aggressive. We are brutal. We are incapable of looking at another's suggestion, view, thought, examination impartially. And being conditioned, life becomes fragmentary. Life, which is the everyday living, the everyday thought, the aspirations, the sense of self-improvement, which is such an ugly thing. That's all fragmentary. That is, this conditioning makes each one of us a self-centered human being, fighting for himself, for his family, for his nation, for his beliefs. And so, ideological differences arise. You are a Christian and another is a Muslim, a Hindu. You two may tolerate each other, but basically, inwardly, there is a deep division. Contempt, one feels superior and all the rest of that. So, this conditioning makes us not only self-centered, but also in that very self-centeredness, there is a process of isolation, a separation, a division, which makes us utterly impossible to cooperate. And is it possible to be free? Is it possible, as we are conditioned, shaped by every influence, by propaganda, by the books we read, the cinemas, the radios, the magazines, all impinging on the mind, shaping it? Is it possible to live in this world completely free, not only consciously, but at the very roots of our being? That, it seems to me, is the challenge, is the only issue. Because if one is not free, there is no love. There is jealousy, anxiety, fear, domination, the pursuit of pleasure, sexually or otherwise. If one is not free, you cannot see clearly. If there is no freedom, there is no sense of beauty. This is not mere arguments supporting a theory that man must be free, which again becomes an ideology. Which again will divide people. So, if to you that is the central issue, that's the main challenge of life, not whether you are happy or unhappy, all that becomes secondary. Whether you can get on with others, or whether your belief, your opinions are more important than other, all those are side issues which will be answered if this question is fully, deeply understood and answered. If you really feel that is the only challenge in life, seeing the actual facts around you and the actual fact inside yourself, how narrow, petty, small we are, anxious, guilty, fearful, hanging on to other people's ideas, opinions, judgments, worshipping public opinion, having heroes, examples. When you see all that in yourself, actually, which breeds fragmentation, a division. If To you, that is the only challenge, the challenge of freedom. And not because the speaker says so, but because you yourself have observed it. You yourself have seen very clearly when you examine the whole map of human existence. The nationalities, the wars, the division of gods and the priests and the ideologies, all that, the conflict, the misery, the sorrow. If this is the central issue for each one of us and nothing else, because unless one is free, you cannot see what is truth. Unless there is complete freedom inwardly, love becomes a pleasure, pain. Unless there is complete inward sense of freedom, not given by another, not as an idea, not as something to be aspired to, then there is no fear of death. See, if this is the central issue, then you and the speaker are in communion. You and the speaker can communicate with each other, whether it is at all possible. And we can then go into it, step by step. But if to you that is not the main interest, that's not the main challenge, but whether, if you ask whether it's possible for human beings to find God, truth, love and all the rest of it, how can you find anything if you're not free? How can you explore, take a voyage? If all the things that you accumulated through generations after generation, that burden you carry with you, or the fear. So it seems to me that is the only issue. And is it possible for human beings, you and I, for us, to be really free? Perhaps you might say, can I be free from physical pain? If you are really free, you will know how to deal with pain. Because most of us have had physical pain of some kind or other. And if you are frightened, not being free, then disease becomes an astonishingly burdensome thing. So, if you and the speaker see this thing clearly, not that the speaker is imposing that as an idea or influencing you, or because of his emphasis you also unconsciously or consciously accept it. Then there will be no communication between us. Please do see the importance of this. If you also see the truth of it, then we two together can find out whether it is at all possible to be completely, wholly free. All right? Can we start from there? As we begin to examine and understand the issue, it will become more and more clear, the implications of it. The enormous nature of it. The quality of it. But if you say it is not possible or it is possible, then you have ceased to inquire, ceased to feel your way into it. So if I may suggest, don't say to yourself it is possible or it is not possible. There are a whole group, intellectuals and others, say it is not possible. And therefore, let's condition the mind better. Let us brainwash it first and then make it comply, obey, follow, accept, both technologically, outwardly, and inwardly, the authority of the state, of the guru, of the priest, or the ideal, and so on and so on. And if you say it is possible, that's just an idea. It's not a fact. And most of us love to live in a vague ideological world. So, a mind that's willing to examine this question deeply must be free to look, and therefore must be free from saying to itself it is possible or it is not possible. So, to examine this question, you begin with freedom. Freedom is not at the end. Right? Here is the question. Whether a human being, you, the individual, living in this world, going to the office, keeping a house, breeding, having children, and so on and on, living in a very, very complex society, living intimately in a relationship, whether it is possible to be free. And yet, live in this world. Live with a man, a woman. A relationship in which complete freedom in which there is no domination, no jealousy, no obedience. And therefore, perhaps, a relationship in which there is love, now, is this possible? First of all, I don't see how one can see anything clearly, the trees, the stars, the world which man has created, which is yourself. The world is yourself, the society is yourself. Whether you can see all that clearly if there is not freedom. If you come to it with an idea, with an ideology, with fear, with hope, with anxiety, with guilt, and all the rest of the agony, obviously you cannot see. And as when one is young, one doesn't see all this, therefore one revolts. The revolt that's going on among the students throughout the world. They're young, fresh. They want things changed. And quite rightly to break up this society. To create a different kind of society. But the politician steps in, and the older generation was scared, stiff, who want their security, their car, their boss, and all the rest of it. They vote for the man. And so it goes on. So, let's come down. Come on. You can't hear? No, that's here. What am I to do? Will that help? Huh? Will that help, sir? Huh?
Avanti, perché sono sempre... Si usano tutti.
Is that all right? Yes. Bene. The loudspeaker doesn't work. Does it work now? So I hope, I don't mean that. If this is so, for you as well as for the speaker, the importance of being completely free from fear, from jealousy, anxiety, the fear of death, the fear of not being loved, the fear of loneliness, the fear of not becoming successful, famous, achieving, the fear of not being loved, and all the fears. If this is the central issue, and and it is the only issue in human existence, we're not being dogmatic, because man has sought freedom from the very beginning of time. Only, he said, there is freedom in heaven, not on earth. Each group, each community translates this freedom in different ways. discarding, putting aside all that. We're asking, living here, now is it possible to be free? If you and I see this common factor as the only challenge in life, then we can begin to find out for ourselves in what manner, how to approach, how to look at it, how to come by it. Right, shall we start from there? First of all, is there a system? Please think this out together. Is there a system, a method? Everybody says there is a method. Do this and do that, follow this guru, follow this path, meditate this way, don't you follow? A system, a gradual step-by-step achievement, a mold into which you fit in, hoping at the end you're going to come to this extraordinary freedom which they all promise. So that's the first thing one has to inquire. Not verbally, but actually and break it down if it is not a fact. So that you will never, under any circumstances, accept a system, a method, a discipline. Please see the importance of the words which we are using. A system means acceptance of an authority who gives you the system. And following that system implies discipline. Doing the same thing over and over and over again, suppressing your own revolt, suppressing your own demands, responses, and all the rest of it, in order to be free. Is there truth in this whole business of a system? Follow this carefully, both inwardly and outwardly. And the communist promises utopia. Or when the guru, when the teacher, the savior says, do these things, you'll have heaven. Right? With all the implications of it. We don't want to make it too complex at the beginning. It will become quite complex as we go along. But if you accept a system, whether it be in a school, in politics, or inwardly, then there is no learning. If there is no communication between the teacher and the student in a school or in the university, when there is no distance between the professor and the student, then they're both examining, both looking, discussing. Then there is freedom to look, to learn. And if you accept a rigid regime laid down by some unfortunate guru, and they are very popular at the present time throughout the world, and you follow them, what actually is taking place? You're destroying yourself in order to achieve freedom promised by another. Destroying yourself not in the sense handing over yourself to something which may be utterly false, utterly stupid, has no reality in itself at all. So one must be very clear on this, right from the beginning. And if you are very clear, you have discarded it completely, you never go back to it. You understand? Not only outwardly. You're no longer belong to any nation, to any ideology, to any religion, to any political party. Because they all are formulas, ideologies that promise systems. And no system outwardly is going to help man. On the contrary, systems are going to divide people. And that's what's happening in the world. And inwardly, to accept another as your authority, to accept the authority of a system. Do listen to all this. Please give your mind and heart to all this to find out. And inwardly, if you have a system, a formula, an ideology, then you live in isolation, in separateness. Therefore, there is no freedom. So, to understand freedom or to come by it, which comes naturally. It isn't something that you grope after and clutch or cultivate. When you cultivate something, it is artificial. And so, if you see the truth of all systems, methods, whether it be methods of meditation, methods of, all that, systems, method, when you see the truth of it, it has no value at all then. Therefore, you have broken down one of the greatest factors of conditioning. when you see the truth that no system is ever going to help man to be free, when you see the truth of it, you're already free of that tremendous falsehood. Right? Now, are you free of that? Not tomorrow, not in days to come, but actually. We cannot go any further till every one of us has understood this. Not abstractly, not as an idea, but actually see the fact of it. And when you see the fact of something, it's gone, finished. The truth of it. Can we discuss that? Not as an argument, pro and against, but actually look at it, examine it, talk it over together as two friends to find out the truth of it. You understand what we're doing? Seeing the factors of conditioning. Seeing it, not doing something about it. Seeing it is the very doing of it. Right? If I see an abyss, I act. There is immediate action. If I see something poisonous, I don't take it. It's finished. The action is instantaneous. So do we see this fact that one of the major conditioning factors is this acceptance of systems, with all the authority, with all the nuances involved in it. Can we discuss it? Or is the speaker overwhelming you? I hope not.
Please, may I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I
We are.
think it is very easy to follow you verbally.
Huh?
Verbally, in words, in ideas, that is not so very difficult.
Ah.
But if you say, for example...
I understand, sir. I understand your question. I have to repeat the question, therefore I have to make it brief, sir. If you don't mind, you have to make it brief. The questioner says that it's easy to follow you verbally. But to actually shake off the acceptance of systems is quite another matter. Isn't that right, sir? What do you mean, sirs, when you say I follow you verbally clearly? You mean we understand the words you're speaking, hear the words, and nothing happens. Which means what? You are looking or listening to words. And obviously, you can listen to words that have no meaning whatsoever. So the question is, how is it possible to listen to the words and at the same time, the very listening is the action? Right, sir? Right? Are you? No, don't bother about that gentleman. I mean, it's the same question for all of us. We say, I intellectually understand what you're talking about. The words are clear. Perhaps the reasoning is fairly good. Somewhat logical and so on, so on. I understand all that intellectually. But the actual action doesn't take place. I am not free of these systems completely. Now, how is this gap between the intellect and the action to be bridged? Is that clear? I understand very well intellectually what you said previously in this morning, but there is no actual freedom from that understanding. And how is this intellectual concept and action to take place instantly? Right? Now, why is it that we think we understand intellectually? Why do we place understanding intellectually first? Why has that become dominant? You understand my question? I'm sure you all feel, I understand it intellectually very well what he's talking about. Then you say to yourself, how am I to put that into action? So the understanding is one thing and action is another. Then we battle to bridge the two. So, is there understanding at all intellectually? It may be a false statement which becomes a block, a hindrance. You see, look, watch it carefully. That becomes the system. You follow? The system is, which everybody uses, intellectually I understand. And it may be utterly false. All that we mean is, I hear what you're talking about. Here. The vibrations of those words passes through my ears, and that's all. Nothing happens. It's like a man or a woman who has got plenty of money. Hears the word generosity and feels vaguely the beauty of it. And it goes back to his miserliness, to his ungenerosity. So, don't let us say, I understand. Don't let us say, I have grasped what you are talking about. Or what would be a factor, truth, is that you have heard a lot of words. Then the question is, why don't you see the truth that no system outwardly or inwardly is going to bring freedom, free man from his misery? Why don't you see the truth of it instantly? That is the problem, not how to bridge the intellectual grasp of something and then putting into action. Why don't you see the complete truth of this fact? What is preventing you? What's that? We believe in the system. Why? That's your conditioning. So your conditioning dictates all the time. So, unless you see the truth of this, one of the major factors of life which conditions man to accept a system, the class difference, the system of war, and the system that promises peace, which is destroyed by nationality, which is another system. And the ideologies of religious as well as political, economic, all those systems. Why don't you see the truth of it? Because you have vested interest in them. If you saw the truth of it, you might lose your money. You might not get a job. You would be alone in a monstrously ugly world. So you consciously or unconsciously say, by Joe, I understand very well what you're talking about, but I can't do it. Good morning, that would be the end of that. That would be most honest. To understand, the questioner asks, to understand this question, we need energy. Sometimes we have it, other times we don't have it. Let's leave the other times. Now, as you are listening to this question, why don't you see the truth of this fact that systems are destructive, separative? To see that you need energy. Why don't you have the energy now to see it? Now, not tomorrow. Is it you have the energy to see it now because you're frightened? Unconsciously, deep down there is a resistance against it because it means you have to give up your gurus, you have to give up your nationality, you have to give up your particular ideology and so on, so on. Therefore you say, please, I intellectually understand.
prevents you.
Huh?
The system prevents you.
The system prevents you. Come on.
Un po' strano.
Huh?
Un po' strano.
Ah, bene. The system prevents you, which is true too. Which is the system educates you, establishes you, gives you a position, so you never question the system, both outwardly and inwardly. A communist well placed in the communist field or in the communist work or in the communist world will never question it, because the very questioning of it is to destroy it. Therefore, tyranny is important. Both outwardly and inwardly. So that is not the question we are asking. Why is it, as you are listening, you don't have the energy to look? That is, to have this energy to look, you must be attentive. You must give your mind, your heart to the thing to look. Why don't you? What do you say to the man who is afraid to look? You can't force him to look, obviously. You can't cajole him. You can't promise. You can't say, well, my chap, do look and you'll get something out of it. Don't bother to look. But be aware of your fear. Don't bother to look at this factor of the systems that have been developed through centuries that hold you. Don't bother about that. But be aware of your fear. But you say, well, I don't want even to be aware of it. I don't want even to touch it, go near it. Then I'm afraid one can't do anything, can one? Because you yourself are preventing yourself from looking. Because you think by looking, you lose your family, your money, your position, your job, all the rest of it. And which means security. If you are frightened to lose your security, look what is taking place. Which is just an idea. You follow? You may never lose your security. Something else may take place. But thought says, be careful, don't look. So thought creates fear. Thought prevents you from looking. Thought says, if you do look, you may create such confusion in your life. As though you are not living in confusion now. So thought begets fear. And therefore you can't see. You can't see the truth that no system on God's earth or in the world of any guru, savior, commissar is going to free you.
Perhaps a person cannot realize fear because he knows not what it is.
Oh, well, if you don't know what fear is, then there's no problem. Then you are free. Even the poor birds are frightened anyhow. So we better stop now. We'll go on with this tomorrow. I mean, not tomorrow, day after tomorrow morning. This is one of the major blocks in the human mind, which has accepted systems as inevitable. And these systems have been created by man in his search for security. And this search for security through systems is destroying man. Which is obvious when you see outwardly what's taking place between the communist world and the varieties of communism, and opposed to capitalism. And the same thing is happening inwardly. My guru and your guru, my truth and your truth, my path and your path, my family and your family. And it is all preventing us, preventing us from being free. Being free, then family may have a totally different meaning. Sex may have a totally different meaning. Then there may be peace in the world, not this division between man and man. So you have to have energy to see this thing. Which means giving your heart and mind to look, not looking with words, with eyes filled with fear. Right, sir.